special news bulletin, Hurricane Erin expands its impact across the Atlantic. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are now watching a special news bulletin on the weather situation in the North Atlantic. Today, August 19, 2025, the full attention of meteorological agencies, international media, and millions of people across several countries is focused on a dangerous weather phenomenon, Hurricane Erin. This is one of the strongest and most complex storms of this year's Atlantic hurricane season. According to the latest update from the U.S. National Hurricane Center, NHC, Hurricane Erin is currently maintaining maximum sustained winds of around 185 km per hour, equivalent to Category 3 to 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. The most notable and concerning factor is the storm's rapid wind field expansion. While the storm's core is gradually weakening as it moves northward, following natural trends, the radius of strong winds is widening, generating large waves and dangerous storm surges across a broad area, from the Caribbean Sea to the Atlantic coast of Canada. Over the past 24 hours, the storm's center has gradually moved away from the waters near Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. This is positive news for those island nations, as the risk of direct damaging winds has eased. However, it also means Bermuda, the U.S. East Coast, and Canada must remain on high alert. Although Erin has curved as forecast, its expanding wind field still poses significant threats, even hundreds of kilometers away from its center. In Bermuda, conditions now appear somewhat more favorable compared to earlier dire predictions. The storm's track is expected to shift west of the island, sparing it from the most destructive winds. Nonetheless, residents cannot afford complacency. Large swells and tropical storm-force gusts will still sweep across the area, posing hazards to maritime activity, coastal infrastructure, and especially the island's tourism sector. Greater risks are now focused on the outer banks of North Carolina, USA. With its low-lying, narrow coastal terrain, the region is highly vulnerable to storm surge and wave action. Experts forecast surge levels of 0.6 to 1.2 meters in areas like Duck, Kitty Hawk, and Nag's Head. Even without direct Category 4 winds, storm surge and beach erosion alone could cause major property damage and severely disrupt local life. Local authorities have already issued evacuation orders for many low-lying zones to ensure residents' safety. Meteorologists note Erin is currently moving slowly, about 11 km per hour toward the northwest. Within the next 48 hours, the storm is expected to accelerate under the influence of upper-level westerly winds. As it tracks farther north, Erin will encounter cooler waters and gradually lose tropical characteristics, weakening before dissipating or transitioning into an extratropical system. Still, the period during which the storm maintains high intensity and an expansive wind field will be its most dangerous phase, requiring close monitoring by forecasters and residents alike. In New England, including Cape Cod, Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard, current scenarios suggest Erin will remain offshore, avoiding a direct landfall like historic hurricanes Bob or Gloria. However, strong gusts, high surf, and localized coastal flooding are still expected. Coastal residents of Massachusetts are advised to take precautions to minimize risks. Farther north, Atlantic Canada, particularly Newfoundland's Avalon Peninsula, is also within the watch zone. There is no current indication Erin will make a direct landfall in Canada, but its expanding size means strong winds and high seas could still bring impacts. Notably, heavy rainfall, which might otherwise help relieve drought in New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Nova Scotia, is not expected, as most of the rain will remain offshore to the storm's east and south. At the same time, forecasters are closely monitoring two new tropical disturbances forming off Africa and in the eastern Atlantic. For now, neither shows strong development signals. However, with sea surface temperatures unusually high, one of the key drivers behind this harsh hurricane season, the chance of at least one system intensifying into a tropical depression or storm in the coming days is significant. Should this occur, the next name on this year's storm list will be Ferdinand. Across the Caribbean and Central America, Indirect impacts from Erin and other tropical disturbances are expected to bring scattered showers, with rainfall probabilities ranging from 30 to 50% in the coming days. Jamaica, Cuba, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic may see localized rainfall of 20 to 40 millimeters. Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Barbados, and St. Lucia are forecast to experience increasing rain by the weekend, raising the risk of flash flooding in coastal urban areas. Honduras, El Salvador, and Nicaragua face greater threats, with rainfall possibly exceeding 100 millimeters, along with flash flood and landslide risks. Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula may also experience heavier rainfall from midweek, disrupting daily life and agriculture. Another major concern is wave action. Forecast models show offshore waves near Erin's center could reach 6 to 12 meters, 20 to 40 feet. Such massive swells, even without direct landfall, are dangerous to shipping, fishing, and international maritime routes. In fact, several shipping lines have already rerouted to avoid hazardous waters and ensure cargo and crew safety. Experts further stress the risk of coastal erosion, a common consequence of storms with large wind fields near shorelines. North Carolina's Outer Banks, already vulnerable to land loss from previous storms, faces renewed threats from Erin, endangering residents and coastal infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, although Erin is not expected to make direct landfall in the United States or Canada, its size and strength still pose serious indirect dangers. Large waves, storm surges, coastal erosion, strong winds, and disruptions to maritime transportation all demand vigilance. Residents along the U.S. East Coast, from North Carolina's Outer Banks to Massachusetts, as well as Canada's Atlantic shores, should continue following updates from National Meteorological Services and local authorities. Bell impact advisories for the U.S. and Canada. United States, while Erin's core will remain offshore. East Coast states, particularly North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, must brace for indirect effects. The Outer Banks of North Carolina are expected to see tropical storm force gusts, surge of 0.6 to 1.2 meters, and widespread flooding in low-lying areas. Severe coastal erosion is also likely, threatening already fragile roads and infrastructure. Northeastern U.S., Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Maine will not see direct landfall, but strong winds and heavy surf are still expected. Popular islands like Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard will face rough seas and localized harbor flooding. Residents and tourists alike are urged to avoid beaches, piers, and waterfront areas while the storm passes offshore. Canada. Direct impacts are most likely in Newfoundland's Avalon Peninsula. Although Erin will weaken and transition extratropical as it moves north, its broad wind field may still bring gusts over 90 km per hour to coastal zones. High surf and storm surges could also disrupt ferry services and shipping lanes. Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and New Brunswick will likely avoid heavy rain due to the storm's offshore track but must remain alert for high seas and strong winds. Wave offshore maritime warnings. One of Erin's greatest threats is the extreme ocean turbulence across the Atlantic. Forecasts show offshore waves of 6 to 12 meters, 20 to 40 feet, spreading widely across the North Atlantic. This may disrupt international shipping lanes from the Caribbean across the Atlantic to Europe. Maritime safety agencies have issued urgent advisories. All fishing boats, cruise ships, and small cargo vessels operating from the Bahamas, Cuba, Jamaica, and Haiti to the U.S. East Coast must urgently seek safe harbor or steer clear of the storm's impact zone. Large cargo vessels in the open North Atlantic should reroute to avoid the high wave zone and prevent capsizing, damage, or cargo loss. Fishermen in the U.S. and Canada are advised not to venture offshore for several days, even after the storm passes, as swells and dangerous currents can persist well beyond the storm's departure. This concludes our special news bulletin on Hurricane Erin, an extreme weather phenomenon reshaping conditions across the North Atlantic. Thank you for staying with us. We will continue to provide the latest updates in our upcoming reports. May you remain safe and resilient through this challenging hurricane season.